In September 1982, a bottle of Extra-Strength Tylenol sat on a Chicago kitchen counter. Just another trusted medicine. Before tampered seals, medicine bottles opened with a simple twist, leaving no trace if someone tampered with them. Tylenol was the go-to pain reliever for millions of American households, a brand synonymous with safety. Over a few days in late September 1982, 7 people in the Chicago area died after taking cyanide-laced Tylenol capsules. To this day, no one has been charged with those murders. The case remains officially unsolved. Potassium cyanide acts fast. Just a few milligrams can stop cellular respiration, causing collapse within minutes. The first victim was 12-year-old Mary Kellerman, who took a capsule for sore throat and collapsed in her family bathroom. Earlier that day, her mother Gianna had bought the very bottle at the Jewel food store on 79th Street. Mary took the capsule, swallowed it with water, and within minutes fell to the floor unconscious. Despite emergency efforts, Mary was pronounced dead at the hospital, leaving doctors baffled by the sudden toxicity. On September 29, 1982, Adam Janis bought an extra-strength Tylenol bottle at the Jewel Osco store in Arlington Heights. Later that afternoon, Adam took a capsule, felt dizzy, and collapsed at the kitchen table, dying within minutes. Stanley and Teresa Janis rushed to Adam's house after hearing the news, arriving to find their brother already gone. Then each took a capsule from the same bottle, and within minutes, both collapsed, joining Adam in tragedy. The next day, September 30th, Mary McFarland, a secretary at Suburban office, took a Tylenol for a headache. She collapsed in the office break room and was rushed to the hospital, where she died later that day. Then Mary Reiner, who had given birth just days earlier, took Tylenol for postpartum cramps on October 1st. She collapsed in her bedroom, her infant nearby, and died despite medical efforts. On October 5th, Paula Prince, a flight attendant, bought the last known contaminated bottle at the Walgreens in Old Town, captured on store surveillance. That evening, she took a capsule, collapsed on her apartment vanity, and was found dead. The bottle was lying open beside her. By October 1st, medical examiners linked 7 deaths through toxicology reports that found lethal potassium cyanide in each victim's blood. Lab tests showed each tainted capsule contained about 65 milligrams of cyanide, far more than a lethal dose. Investigators plotted the 8 contaminated bottles across 7 different stores, showing the poisoning were not limited to a single batch or location. Early on, police checked whether a single faulty production lot could explain the cases, but the bottles came from multiple manufacturing plants and lot numbers. The leading theory emerged that someone had taken the bottles from the store shelves and laced them with cyanide, and then returned them undetected. Over the next days, police cars with loudspeakers warned residents not to take any Tylenol until further notice. Local TV stations broke the story on October 1st, and within hours the news spread nationwide. By October 2nd, Johnson & Johnson executives convened an emergency task force recognizing the crisis threatened their flagship product. On October 5th, the company halted all Tylenol production and advertising, pulling nearly 31 million bottles from shelves. The nationwide recall eventually recovered an estimated 31 million bottles, valued at over 100 million at retail. Beyond Chicago, shoppers nationwide began to fear every over-the-counter pill, wondering if the next bottle could be poisoned. In the weeks that followed, copycat tampering incidents appeared with other medicines, proving that idea had spread. Local, state, and federal agencies formed a joint task force, pooling resources to hunt the unknown perpetrator. Investigators collected every recovered bottle, swabbed for prints, and sealed them as evidence for further analysis. By tracing lot numbers, detectives confirmed the tainted bottles came from different production plants, ruling out a single factory error. A public hotline flooded with thousands of tips, creating both promising leads and countless dead ends. Investigators sorted possible motives into three baskets: extortion, random terror, or a personal grudge against the victims. Early suspects included anyone with access to cyanide, such as lab workers, jewelers, or photographers, though none matched the evidence. In 1982, cyanide could be bought legally from certain chemical suppliers for use in gold mining or electroplating, making it relatively accessible. In early October, Johnson & Johnson received a hand-typed extortion letter demanding $1 million to stop the killings. Investigators soon focused on James W. Lewis, a New York accountant who had sent the extortion letter to Johnson & Johnson. On October 19, 1982, federal agents arrested Lewis in New York City, where he was living under a false name. In 1983, Lewis was convicted of extortion for the letter, but the jury found no proof linking him to the murders. Throughout his imprisonment, Lewis maintained he had nothing to do with the poisonings, saying that the letter was a misguided attempt to earn money. Dozens of other individuals were examined: chemists, disgruntled employees, even hobbyists, but none produced the evidence needed for charges. Investigators reconstructed a likely route. The tainted bottles moved through multiple stores over several days, suggesting a deliberate, spaced-out campaign. Despite years of work, thousands of interviews, and millions of pages of notes, the case file remains open. No one has been charged with the murders. In the 2020s, anniversary specials and investigative series revived public interest, hoping new forensic tools might break the silence. The FBI once asked for a DNA comparison to the Unibomber, but no match was found, leaving the idea purely speculative. To this day, the person who laced those Tylenol capsules with cyanide has never been identified, charged, or brought to trial. By October 2nd, Johnson & Johnson executives held an emergency press conference pledging full cooperation with investigators and promising to protect public safety. The nationwide recall pulled an estimated 31 million bottles from shelves, a retail loss valued at over $100 million. Engineers rapidly tested dozens of tamper-resistant concepts, from glued cartons to neckbands and inner foil seals, seeking a reliable solution. In November 1982, the redesigned triple-seal Tylenol returned to stores: glued box, shrink wrap over the cap, and a foil liner under the cap. On November 4, 1982, the FDA issued a rule requiring tamper-resistant packaging for all over-the-counter medications. After a 1986 tampering incident involving capsules, the FDA tightened the rule, mandating an extra foil seal for two-piece gelatin products. The packaging revolution spread far beyond medicine, as food, drinks, and consumer goods adopted shrink bands, foil seals, and other tamper-evident cues. Business schools soon featured the Tylenol response as a textbook example of swift, transparent crisis management. Within a year, Tylenol regained market share, yet the memory of the poisonings lingered in every NUSU safety seal. Public outrage over the murders prompted Congress to pass federal anti-tampering laws, making the deliberate contamination a felony. Today, every time we break a foil seal or hear the snap of a safety band, we are feeling the legacy of 1982 Tylenol murders. Decades later, surviving family members like Joe Janis still speak of the lost brothers, sister-in-law, and a niece, keeping their memories alive. Mary Reiner's daughter recalls seeing her mother collapse that night, a memory that shaped her own view of safety and loss. Each anniversary, Chicagoans gather at memorials to honor the 7 lives lost, laying flowers and observing moments of silence. Streaming services and cable networks continue to release documentaries, hoping fresh interviews or forensic advances might finally name the perpetrator. In July 2023, James W. Lewis died of natural causes, closing one avenue of inquiry without solving the core mystery. While today's labs can extract DNA from decades-old evidence, the Tylenol case yielded no usable biological traces, leaving investigators without a genetic profile to test. Most of us never pause to ask why those seals exist. They're quiet guardians born from tragedy that reshaped how we protect everyday goods. In this miniature world, a single poison capsule changed countless lives. Just as in our own, small actions can echo far beyond what we see. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the Tylenol murders, please hit the like button and subscribe to the Shorts Drama channel for more gripping true crime stories. And don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. Just tap the bell icon next to the subscribe button. See you next time.